Ari Lewis Show.
Welcome to another episode of the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports and News Radio. The original airing of this podcast is November 5th, 2015. The election cycle heating up in the United States. Both Republican and Democratic parties have had some pretty interesting debates. On the line right now, we're going to go back to politics and get an expert on. This gentleman has done everything in so many fields, so many different types of great things. He is a vice president of the Orthodox Union and was on the Senate staff of the late great Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. May he rest in peace. And bring on the program, give a warm Ari Lewis welcome to Dr. David Luchins. Doctor, how you doing out there?
Pretty good, Ari. Always good to hear from you. Always good to hearing from you. And what's on your mind about our fascinating political process?
Well, there's so much, but first let's start with Republican debate. Pretty interesting turn of events in the recent debate where Ted Cruz calls out the media during the debate, and all the Republicans kind of jump suit and follow him and criticize the debate moderators, and they get a lot of cheers from the crowd when they do that. Give us your thoughts when that all took place.
It's all part of a larger pattern, and actually, if I can make an opening statement, as Donald Trump says, I would start by saying that we had this complete reversal. Republicans usually have a coronation, as you know. Democrats usually have a free-for-all. This time Democrats are heading, pending a cataclysm, to a coronation, and Republicans are having a free-for-all. We live in silos. We have become extreme. People get their news from papers they agree with, media they agree with. They're 50 million. For example, Obama has higher poll ratings right now than Bush, Reagan, or Clinton had at this point of their presidency, and yet he's incredibly unpopular in the conservative world, and the world that I think Ari, you and I generally move in. And the reason is because there are 100 million Americans who haven't heard the word Benghazi, who haven't heard the word, Clinton emails, because that's not their source of news, don't press it. And there are millions of Americans, on the other hand, who only get the news from Fox News and conservative. And this was very jarring, because suddenly the Republican audience, thanks to Donald Trump in particular, his giant Republican audience, is hearing on a very liberal station, the mirror image of Fox News. They're suddenly getting these gotcha questions, and Ted Cruz sees a window of opportunity, jumps in, and he was right. He was right. The question, but it was especially effective because the people are used to being coddled. People, the most telling thing was when I think it was Ted Cruz said he wanted Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, and Rush Limbaugh to be the only moderators of the debate, allowed to moderate debates. In other words, only people who agree with us are allowed to question us. And I'm assuming that Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders would be very happy to have Lawrence O'Donnell and Rachel Maddow as the only ones interviewing them. That's basically what's going on. We're stuck in our silos.
All right, so when you were on my program over the summer, we talked about Donald Trump and that you felt he wasn't a serious candidate. He's been first place in the polls for a while, but now it looks like he's starting to fade. And he's obviously still at the top, but he started to take shots at his other Republican comrades, if you will. What's going to happen with the Donald, let's say, in the next few months?
I still think Donald Trump is not a serious candidate for the presidency of the United States. He is spending no money on infrastructure, no money on delegate selection. To win the nomination, you have to get delegates. He has spent his last report of September, he has spent so far in this campaign less than $3 million. Jeb Bush probably has spent that on fast food. He gets free media. He loves it. He inhales it. He gets high on it. But he's substantively, the question is, if people are thrilled by him, will they turn out? And in fact, what's really worrying the Republican base is that they're going to go home. In the most recent poll, 80% of Carson people said they could not consider another candidate. 55% of Trump's people said they would not consider another candidate. These people, Trump, if they turn out, will not turn out again. They'll be like Ron Paul's candidates used to vote and then stay home, and that's one of the reasons that Barack Obama won Ohio. Just for a footnote, in 2008 in Ohio, Barack Obama got less votes than John Kerry did 4 years before. But John McCain got 400,000 less votes than George Bush got because the poll voters who were turned on and turned out the primary stayed home. And there's a real fear that Trump is now taking these shots at his Republican. Just today, he put out a press release which is stunning. I mean, in the kind of language, attacking Rubio, attacking Bush, attacking Carson. His supporters inhale that, and they feel that way. They may stay home, and you can just start playing Hails with the Chief or Hillary Clinton.
So when you say that Donald Trump is not a serious candidate, would the point of him running be just the publicity, promotion for his company, promotion for himself. As you said, he loves the media. Would that be the reason that he got involved in the first place, and that's why he stays involved?
Well, it was Gladstone who said the British Empire was acquired in fits of absent-mindedness, and I think Trump, having flirted with the presidential campaign for the last 3 or 4 cycles, suddenly decided that to jump in, and he has this angry outsider image. He's attracting angry middle-class white voters who feel their country's been stolen from them. His campaign is not geared to people who are policy wonks. And you understand the Republican Party has its Christian conservatives with a battle there. There's really street fights going now. There's the Christian evangelicals where Cruz and Carson are duking it out. Huckabee is completely out of the picture. Jindal has taken off. Then there was the moderate business wing of the party, which, again, George Pataki, Lindsey Graham have no traction at all, unfortunately. I say unfortunately, personally, Christie is just about dropped out now. And that wing of the party is down to Rubio and Bush. And then you have the angry outsider wing of the party, where you have Trump has took all the oxygen away from Scott Walker, oxygen away from Rand Paul, and he's destroyed their candidacies. Quite frankly, there are many people, myself included, thought Scott Walker was a very serious possibility to win the nomination because he could combine the business wing with the angry outsider wing. Trump has held that wing for so long, and yet I think it's inevitable that at some point he's going to pull out.
Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports News Radio, joined by Dr. David Luchins, talking about the primary season in the United States. So you brought up Marco Rubio, definitely a chic pick. A lot of people like him. People are somewhat concerned about his age, also financial records with his personal finances. So assess, if you will, Marco Rubio's chances of pulling this off and what he has to do to get that done.
I think, again, I'm speaking only for myself, a personal opinion. I'm stunned at the similarities between Marco Rubio and Barack Obama. They both would be the first member of their race to be elected president. They both are extremely young, very inexperienced, a few years in the legislature, and they came to the Senate and ran for president. I actually am personally in favor of a constitutional amendment forbidding first-term senators to run for president. Then both of them were godfathered in politics by a mysterious Jewish billionaire, Crown in the case of Chicago in the case of Obama, and Graham in Miami. They both had questions about their finances, and guess what? One man won, and the other guy has a shot. But I think Bush has $100 million in a super PAC, and I would not. My rules. We went through this many times. The Republican Party tends to nominate the guy who won the money primary. It tends to nominate the guy who ran before. So in 1952, only one Republican has won the nomination without running before, and that was George W. Bush. Jeb gets the same ride. And since 1952, they've only nominated one candidate, Barry Goldwater, who was not leading among the establishment and the financial people. And therefore, I think that based on that logic, when all is said and done, Jeb Bush is about where John McCain was 8 years ago when McCain won the nomination. I'll be stubborn and say I still think Bush is the best chance at Republican nomination. Rubio is the second best chance, but I think Rubio would be toast for Hillary Clinton, and I think Bush would be a serious contender when all is said and done in the election.
So let's go to Jeb Bush and talk about him. Interesting when he runs and when he campaigns that he has the banner Jeb and not Bush. Donald Trump even brought this up. Are you ashamed of your family name? Because it's ironic because W obviously looks as a part, does not want to be, Jeb does not want to bring W obviously into the fold, but he's there because of his family name. So it's an ironic position for Jeb Bush. So if you just assess that for us.
Well, I don't know if it's picked up in the Israeli media, but George Herbert Walker's Bush's book came out where he blasted Cheney and Rumsfeld for having done a terrible disservice to his son, George W. Bush. I think we have the Bush family making a serious effort here to rehabilitate the brand and the name. And I think Jeb Bush is a serious fellow. He's been known for years as the most serious policy member of the Bush family, after very much his father's son in that respect. If the gregarious George W. is very much his mother's son. And I think that Jeb Bush has an issue. He can't. It's like the same problem Hillary Clinton has with Bill. She can't run away from his legacy because his legacy is the biggest thing. It's the only reason she's being seriously considered a contender. If Jeb Bush's last name was Smith, he wouldn't have been governor of Florida. He wouldn't be he wouldn't be a serious candidate for president. But then again, that's true of Ted Kennedy, too, and he went pretty far.
Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports and News Radio. We're joined by Dr. David Luchins talking about the primary season in the United States. One last question regarding the Republican debate.
Sure.
Carly Fiorina had a good rise after the second debate, and questions came up about her business background. Is she just there so Republicans could say, yeah, we have female candidates. Look, here's one right there.
You know how much longer she's going to be there. I think what happened to Carly Fiorina is the same thing, is that when Trump went after her on her record as a CEO, on her enormous golden parachute, on the fact that she lost 30,000 workers, Americans are scared of losing their job. Americans are scared of becoming equality, which Rubio addresses well, I might add. And I think that he sort of like declared the emperor's not wearing any clothes. He hit her on that. That's one of the most telling things he's done. I think the only telling thing he's done in the debates, and that I think he really took down Fiorina. She was at one point at 12%. She's at 3%. The polls, 2.8 in the one I just saw today. And I'm not sure how much longer she's a serious contender. I would say that I think it's over for her. But then again, I still think Bush is going to be the nominee. So what do you want from me?
There we go.
Bush or Rubio? Again, I must tell you, I think Kasich or Pataki or Graham would be next president of the United States if they could be nominated. And then again, so would Joe Biden if he decided he could be nominated. So.
So let's go over to the Democratic side. Talk about Jim Webb's impact on this election cycle. He stands next to Bernie Sanders in the debate. Bernie Sanders was a conscientious objector during Vietnam. So
Right.
Talk about Jim Webb's impact on this
his impact
Democratic primary.
was actually nothing. I mean, he was inconsequential, frankly, in the race. Bernie Sanders pulled Hillary Clinton to the left far enough, and then he was a terrific foil for Hillary Clinton, and she was able to be the heroine of the middle class and of capitalism. He did him a great service. I'm more intrigued, if I can, Ari. I want to suggest to you that the possibility there's somebody looking at race to the White House right now whose name hasn't been mentioned too much. I think it's the only person in America that could enter this race next March and be elected.
Okay, who's that?
His name is Michael J. Bloomberg. He's worth $40 billion. If the Democratic Party is perceived as being the same old Clinton redux, if the Republican Party comes up with a candidate who's vulnerable, he might say, look, enough of charisma, enough of the old school politics. I offer you competence. There are people who used to be on his staff as mayor, who are working very hard, spreading rumors and reaching out to people and saying, hang loose. Mike's still thinking about it. Now, again, if it was Sanders against Trump, he'd be president of the United States. But he needs some space to run between the two of them.
Wow. Okay, so if he's going to run, how much time realistically does he need to campaign? When would he need to get in this race to have a realistic chance to win the Democratic primary?
He's not going to run the Democratic nomination. He runs as an independent. There's no way he wins as a Democrat. No way. He can't win as a Democrat. He can't win as a Republican. He only wins as an independent, going down the middle between a Democrat and if Democrat is and if there's a weak. Both Democrats, for example, Hillary Clinton has, for all of her pluses, a very high unfavorable rating. And before the Republicans are done with each other, the Republican nominee could very well have a high unfavorable rating too. Bloomberg has plenty of baggage. Bloomberg's problem with guns, Bloomberg's problem with sodas. But Bloomberg, if the people want a manager, they want competence, Bloomberg might be able to project that in a positive fashion. I'm not saying he's going to run, but in this crazy political cycle, I think it's possible.
Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports and News Radio, joined by Dr. David Luchins, talking about the primary season in the United States. So let's go to Joe Biden, because Joe Biden at this point is not declared. People say, like many experts say, that if he were to jump in, he could have a realistic chance to win. So why would he not jump in?
Well, his son died in June. I think had he jumped in June or July, when Hillary Clinton was suffering the most, when she was being battered in the media and by the Republicans and by Sanders. Sanders was playing Eugene McCarthy, as I said to you on your show last time, and Hillary Clinton was turning into Lyndon Johnson, and she could very well, I think if he had jumped in then, he might. Indeed, I am stunned at the people, Democrats and Republicans, who have told me that they'd be prepared to support Joe Biden, including some very influential, very wealthy people. Biden brings a sense of adulthood, of competence. He works well with Republicans. He has good credentials on foreign. In other words, he has credentials on foreign enough. He's conservative enough on foreign policy and military to make Republicans feel comfortable, and he's liberal enough on social issues while still a religious Catholic to make to reassure the middle. I must tell you, but he chose not to run. I think a lot of it is psychological. He says, I take him at his word. Joe Biden has no guile. You know, he may be a fool, but he's not stupid. And he says his 11-year-old granddaughter, whose father just died, sat in her lap and said, Daddy left me. You're not going to leave me, are you? And I think that had a huge impact on him. I think he just decided he wasn't ready to leave his family. It was a very brutal race. He knows how brutal Hillary Clinton can be and would be. And then if he beat Clinton, he still would have a very difficult race against the Republicans. And he's at this point in his life he decided he didn't need it. He didn't want it, which is sad because I actually think he would have been a formidable candidate. And I think he would have been a very, I told someone that a Pataki-Biden debate, the whole country would fall asleep because it would be very boring, but at least we'd have two competent adults running against each other.
Well, let's talk about Bernie Sanders now, because Bernie Sanders kind of has this rock star mentality, if you will. A lot of people are into him, excited when he speaks. He's gotten some support from semi-celebrities, etc. And you've talked about, again, the pattern of not the establishment. He's certainly not the establishment. What does he need to do to beat Hillary Clinton in the primary?
I don't think he can. I think you have a time machine to go back in time and change some of the things he said and done through the years. You cannot say you're a democratic socialist and expect to win the nomination of a major party of the United States president, even though it really something wrong with being a democratic socialist, but it doesn't wash in the United States politically. It's poison. And I think his record and some of his votes, some of his positions, I don't think Bernie Sanders winning the nomination. I think he's managed to pull the Democratic Party in the dialogue to the left. It was if Trump made immigration out of the blue the big issue of the Republican Party for 4 months this summer, when it was not expected to be an issue at all. Bernie Sanders has done income inequality. He has made it an issue in the Democratic Party. You can expect a very strong platform at the convention. You can expect a very strong, it to be a major. But then again, I spoke to someone who's real cynical, and there was a Clinton who actually worked for Bill Clinton, who said the day after Sanders drops out of the race, income inequality will not be an issue anymore. Hillary Clinton has always been extremely close with Wall Street, extremely close with business. The Clintons had no problems with big business. You may recall the whole problem with Hillary Clinton's health care plan was it was written at the behest of and to satisfy the big health insurance companies.
That's another interesting contrast to Bernie Sanders. Back in 2000, Joe Lieberman ran, obviously, as a vice president. It was a big deal. Talked about him not just being Jewish, but Orthodox, etc. Bernie Sanders' Judaism really hasn't come up so much. Is that because Bernie Sanders is not so religious, per se?
Well, when John Kennedy ran in 1980, was a huge thing. He was a Catholic. When Ed Muskie ran in 1964 as vice president, no one noticed he was Catholic. Once you've broken the barrier is broken. When Sandra Day O'Connor went to the Supreme Court, it was a big thing. She was a woman. Ruth Bader Ginsburg got on, nobody cared. If Israel got a female prime minister tomorrow, it wouldn't be a big deal. Golda Meir was already there. The first is always a big commotion and a big deal. I don't think. I mean, you're right, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is no more less religious than Charles Schumer. The only difference he doesn't wear his Judaism on his sleeve, because Vermont is not a state where you get a lot of votes by being the Shomer Yisrael, like Chuck Schumer claims to be.
Interesting. So the first one, yeah, that's a great point. That's true, because, again, it's not really come up. Well, what about the fact about Rubio and Cruz, their background? Is that getting enough play as far as their ethnic background? Or, again, is it because we've had a black president already, and that was such a big deal that maybe the whole non-white candidates, or whatever you want to call it, it's not going to be a big deal anymore?
Well, first of all, we lump all Latinos together. Cruz and Rubio are both Cuban Americans. Cuban Americans tend to be conservative, Republican, and are basically Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and Chicanos basically see them as whites. I don't think there's any their ethnicity is not stressed. They never have. As a matter of fact, Cruz did horribly in the Mexican American vote, as you could probably guess, in Texas, dreadfully. George Bush when he was governor, got 45% the second time of the Mexican-American vote. I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but I think Cruz got something between 3 and 5%. So, I mean, being a Cuban-American is not necessarily to get you support. Jews and Muslims are both monotheists, so it doesn't necessarily mean a Jew gets a Muslim vote or a Muslim gets a Jewish vote. We tend to we lump everyone together. It's like over there in Israel, where you'd say, well, we Ashkenazi Jews call everyone who's not Ashkenazic Sephardic. And so we would expect that Moroccan Jews would have this great affinity for Jews from Yemen politically, and we know that's not the case at all.
Right. That is certainly opposite, to say the least. Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest is Dr. David Luchins. We're talking about the primary season. A few more minutes with him. The doctor's very busy. So they were talking about the Republican debate, about the media being tough, etc., and then a weird statement saying that the Democratic debate did not field tough questions. I disagree with that. Anderson Cooper seemed pretty tough. Times he got oohs and ahs from the crowd, especially asking Hillary Clinton about being in the top 1%. So what did you think of Anderson Cooper's moderating skills?
Again, we live in these silos. If you are someone who's marinated in the Republican news cycle and the Fox News cycle, you want the reporters to talk about Hillary Clinton, about her server, and about Benghazi, and about just what role she had in Vince Foster's death. And if you are marinated in the Democratic cycle, you want the Democratic candidates to ask about the income inequality and about why you don't care about poor people and why you won't let a woman die before she has an abortion. So if you're not going to get those kind of questions then you're going to say the person's ineffective. I think Anderson Cooper did a skilled job. I think he's an excellent reporter and a very good moderator. And I must tell you, I thought, on the other hand, that in the last Republican debate, the questions, that first round of questions might have been appropriate for a last round of questions after you get to the serious stuff. But to start out with the lightweight stuff, I was one of the people who was very happy with Ted Cruz taking them down for it.
Yes, indeed. And there have been some strange questions throughout all these debates, especially one of the Republican debates asking them what would be their code name and who would they put on a $20 bill, all that kind of stuff. Is there time and room for silly questions at all during any point of the debate?
The last round of questions, maybe. You can ask Bill Clinton if he wears boxers or briefs at the end of the debate, not at the beginning. That shouldn't be the first thing on our minds. Shouldn't be the most important issue. There's nothing wrong with asking a light question, see how they deal with light questions. We want the President of the United States to have a sense of humor, but to start with that and to leave with that, Donald Trump, you're a cartoon character, I thought it was a bit bizarre. On the other hand, there's some hard and good questions that haven't been asked, and probably, thanks to the last debate, are probably never going to be asked now.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, is that going to forever change debate questions? Because moderators are, at the end of the day, human beings. They don't want to be booed by thousands of people. Are they going to be a lot more cautious about asking really, really tough questions they don't want to be booed?
I don't think the booing was because of tough questions.
The booing was because of attendance.
It was silly questions. In other words, Donald Trump, are you a comical character, is a silly question. But to say, for example, someone would say, Mr. Trump, you spent less money on your campaign than anyone else on the stage right now, and you don't have any delegate process in place, and you don't even have people lined up as delegates in New Hampshire and South Carolina, while Bobby Jindal has delegates, for goodness sakes, lined up. How do you explain that? Are you a serious candidate or not? I think that's a good question, a tough question. But to say, are you a comical character running a comical campaign, talking to people that's like an action figure? Yeah, that's a stupid question in my opinion. I think it's a perfectly legitimate question to say, Mrs. Clinton, you have changed your position on more times than any point in American public life. Why should we believe you when you change your position now on the Pacific Trade Agreement? You've changed it already once. Why can't you change it back? That's legitimate. But to say, Mrs. Clinton, you have never properly explained to the American people why 4 people died on your watch in Benghazi. I mean, people don't want to hear about that. The people who watch the Democratic debates haven't heard about Benghazi yet.
Yes, indeed. All right. Last question we have for the doctor. You brought up Benghazi. You're talking about news cycles, where you are, if you're, getting your news from Fox News or getting your news from different sources. The Benghazi deal, let's say Hillary wins the primary, how much will that play into the general election when you have both parties kind of melting together as far as the media sources to some degree? How will that play in the general election?
Kevin McCarthy lost his chance to be Speaker of the House of Representatives when he declared that the whole purpose of Benghazi hearings was to bring down Hillary Clinton's numbers. You had major staff member of the Republican Party who was on the committee resign, saying the whole thing is just a political front. And that's a Republican guy. I think that the Benghazi thing, and the contrary, makes Hillary Clinton a heroine to the Democratic base, helped her staunch the losses to Bernie Sanders. He has said American people don't want to hear about your emails anymore. I think she's a brilliant Clinton. Her husband had the same skill. Took something negative and made herself into the victim, and turned it around. Like Bill Clinton actually improved himself politically before the Mock Lewinsky thing was over. His poll ratings went up before it was done, because he convinced the Democratic base that he and many independents that he was a victim of Kenneth Starr. And I think we'll have the same sort of thing here. I think the longer the Republicans say Benghazi, I'll give you an example. The example is Barack Obama's birth certificate. When everyone was yelling about his birth certificate, no one was debating his health care plan.
Right.
And that's exactly what he wanted. That's why he didn't release it, in my opinion, for 3 years. Because he wanted people yelling about that, not debating about the contents and the merits of his plan, of his policies. So I think he'll be perfectly happy to have the entire elections focused on Benghazi and have no discussion of what she's going to do about health care or Social Security or taxes or anything else. And she'll win.
There you go. Again, another episode of the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel
Always a
Sports
pleasure, Ari.
News
Thank
Radio.
you very much. Looking
My
forward
guest
to
has
hearing
been
you next
Dr.
again.
David Luchins. This has
you.
been a pleasure treat and a big honor, and I know you're very busy, very generous with your time today. So, again, on behalf of myself and all the listeners, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ari. Always a pleasure. Be well. Thank you. Shabbat shalom. Thanks.